Hi, this is Nahi. Today we're going to go over the different enneatypes to give you some information that will help you figure out your type if you don't know it already or if you just want to clarify it a little bit more. Now there's a typical process that we go through when figuring out our type, and the first thing everybody does is take an assessment. So if you haven't already taken an assessment, you might want to do that. There's a link to one of the best Enneagram assessments on our Aspire website, and it takes you to the Enneagram Institute, where the test called the RHETTI, I think, that was created by Don Riso and Russ Hudson, and that does a pretty good job of identifying your type. It doesn't cost that much money. At the time of this recording, only about $12, and it will not only give you a full description of whatever type you scored the highest for, but it will also give you descriptions of the numbers that you scored second and third and fourth highest, I think, and those numbers, that gives you an opportunity to kind of read all of the different descriptions of all the types to see which one you resonate with. Because with the Enneagram, unlike other assessments, the assessment doesn't guarantee your type. It only gives you an initial indicator. Now, for some people, when you take the assessment, one number is going to show up more clearly than any other number, and you're going to resonate with the description of that number, and you're going to know your type. And I would say maybe 50, 60, 70% of people are like that. But another 30, 40, maybe 50% of people aren't quite sure. And so when they read the descriptions, or maybe get an Enneagram book and read the descriptions of every type, that might give them a little bit of a better idea. But if they still aren't sure, then what we're going to do today can help a little bit. And the fourth option, so what we're going to do here is the third option, looking at your core motivation. The fourth option is to ask others for their opinion. But even if that other person is an Enneagram expert, keep in mind that all they can give you is how you're showing up to them, which is valuable information because you don't know how you show up to other people. But you're the only one that knows what your motivation is for your behavior. And I can be angry and sit next to someone else who's equally angry, and we can show two completely different behaviors that express that anger. And all anybody outside of us can see is how we're expressing our anger. They're not really seeing what our anger is all about. We're the only ones that know why. And that's why you have to kind of be the final judge of your own enneatype. So let's go through the Enneagram and look at the different types. So there's 9 different types, and the first place to start when you're looking at which type am I, and let me see if I can get a core sense of it, is the labels that people have who've been using this tool for so long have assigned to each of the numbers. And the reason is because people have painstakingly tried to choose words that are good descriptors of the core essence of what shows up for each type. So the 1 is called the perfectionist reformer because typically what drives a 1 is perfecting things. Now they might be perfecting themselves, they might be perfecting others, they might be perfecting what their house looks like or their yard, they might be getting A's on papers, they might be perfecting their body, they might be perfecting the world. And when they perfect the world, they come across as social reformers. So the drive, though, for a 1 tends to be to perfect, to fix, to make right. The 2 is labeled the giver or the helper because the drive of the 2 is to pay attention to what others need and satisfy those needs, which comes across as giving and helping. So if I see you're hurt, I'm automatically driven to fix your pain or to help you in some way. For the 3s, their drive tends to be to achieve or to perform or to succeed. The 4 is called the individualist because they tend to feel separate. So the core sense of a 4 is that they feel separate from others, and they're constantly asking the question, what's wrong with me in comparison to others, or how am I different from others? And they're continuously looking for what makes them unique and special. And sometimes they're called the romantic because they're very in touch with their feelings, both their positive feelings, but also their sad feelings, which many people are uncomfortable with and they're very comfortable with. The 5s are called the observers and the thinkers because they tend to live in their head. And so the essence of a 5 is they tend to be those very close people that it's hard for you to connect with them because they're living in their inner world. The 6 is called the loyalist and the questioner. And the reason the 6 is called a loyalist is because they're actually naturally pretty distrustful, but when they find an organization or a person or a group that they trust, they're extremely loyal. And they question a lot to make sure that things are right. 6s are always asking the question, what can go wrong? And so they're always asking questions and playing devil's advocate. 7s are called the enthusiast or the epicure because pretty much they enthusiastically go from one thing to another, and they want to taste everything wonderful in life. They want an experience of everything, and they're always seeing new possibilities. It could be food, it could be adventure, it could be travel, it could be just different ideas. But the 7 has this tendency to move from one thing to another very rapidly, and they might not get bored quickly. So they might not stay in the present with whatever experience. So they might go to a party, and after 15 minutes they're bored and they want to go to the next party. And 8, the leader and challenger. So the reason the 8 is often called a leader or a challenger is because they have tremendous energy, probably more energy than any type, and that energy can be very compelling. So people can be drawn to them because the 8s are always on the lookout for what's wrong in the world, and they will attack it or stand against it. And so if they have people, then they will protect their people from anyone who tries to hurt them. So you can kind of think of them as a leader of a clan. And if you're part of the 8th clan, the 8 has your back. If anyone does you wrong, boy, is the 8 going to go out after them. So an 8 is very alive, and their core essence is very, very energetic, very strong, and very compelling, and also quite intimidating. The 9 is called the peacemaker or the mediator, and they have a very quiet sense about them, and they are very attuned to other people, similar to the 2. But the 2's attuned to other people with the motivation of finding out what people need so that they can help them. A 9 is attuned to other people because they're interested in who they are and maybe what makes them happy, and they're very gifted at bringing other people together because they understand what other people's opinions are, often better than their own opinion. So what I'm going to do now is go through each person in a little bit more detail, each type in a little bit more detail, just to give you a few bullets and an image. So we'll start with the 1. So I like this image of perfect 10s because even though a 1 knows it's probably not realistic to get 10s on everything all the time, that's not going to stop them from trying. They feel that the effort's completely worth it to consistently work to get 10s. And I don't know many 1s that haven't found it easy to recognize themselves. So, when people get confused about what number they are, it's usually not the 1. Usually the 1 is, yep, that's me. I'm a perfectionist. I like to have everything right, and it irritates me when things aren't right, and it really irritates me when other people don't seem to care about things being right. So kind of a 1 is generally going to feel drawn to fix or make right. But keep in mind that the core motivation is to fix or make right, but it can be applied in many different places. So some 1s are trying to make themselves perfect. Other 1s aren't that focused on themselves, but they're trying to fix other people. And other 1s are trying to fix society, which is why they're called reformers. 1s tend to feel a sense of joy when everything's perfect, perfectly in order, everything's perfectly in place. They're the kind of person who doesn't necessarily feel comfortable going to bed without everything being in its place and ready, for the next day. 1s will tend to feel resentment or anger when others do things wrong, and they often try to control it. What I mean here is that they try to control their anger. So because anger is not such a perfect emotion, 1s usually don't yell and stomp their feet when someone else, unless they're backed against the wall. But when someone's not doing it right, they can get really frustrated, and it can come out in more simmering resentment. So ones have to put a lot of energy into holding down that anger and not blowing up at people sometimes, especially when they're around people who just don't seem to care about getting it right, and that can just drive a one nuts. So that's sort of the general feel for the one. Let me give you the general feel for the two. So the general feel for the two is to be hyper aware of what other people's need and do what they can to meet those needs. Now the thing with the two is that goes hand in hand though with being appreciated. So the two is sort of giving to get or giving for a purpose. It feels very unselfish, and they will give and work to their heart's content. I mean, they will just work, do everything, especially if they feel appreciated for how much they give. So a two will feel a sense of joy and work till the ends of the earth to help somebody, especially if they're appreciated for how much, how much they give and how much they help. But they may resent it if others don't acknowledge how hard they work or everything they do to help. But they're motivated at their core to care for people, to make people okay. So twos can be very sweet, they can be very loving, but they can also get angry if they're not appreciated. And they can overdo it where they're smothering people or where they're just getting into people's space more than people want them to get into their space. Now, I'd like to give you an example here because as a two, nobody that I know right now who does a lot of work with the Enneagram can see that I'm a two, and a lot of them will say, well, you don't look like a two. I think maybe you're a five. I think maybe you're a six, but you certainly don't look like a two. So how do I know I'm a two? Well, the way I know I'm a two is because I looked at how I grew up, and I looked at how I was always hyper, and I'm still hyper attuned to other people. But when I was younger, my whole goal was to make them like me, or actually, if I was to be more precise, to make sure that they didn't not like me. So I kind of was always working for people's approval, and that was exhausting for me. But I felt like I had to do it because if I didn't do it, something very horrible would happen. And so I would have this unsettled feeling in me. And so even now as I'm an adult, if there's an issue with someone where I feel like I might have accidentally offended somebody, I have this compulsion to make it right, or to make sure that they're okay, or to make sure that they're not mad at me before I can settle down. I'm going to have a little bit of underlying anxiety. So that two is still with me at my very core, even though I don't look like someone who's running around trying to connect with people and be really close and meet everybody's needs and bring them chicken noodle soup. So that's why you have to look at the core motivation. So the only way that I know that I'm a two, because I don't really show up like these bullets describe me, of course I would love to think it's because I'm a very mature two, but really it's because when I look at the core motivation is looking at other people and trying to make sure they're okay. So, giving to others. All right, so since I'm not any of the other numbers, I can't give you that same example exactly for all of the other numbers, but I will try. So with the three, threes are driven to achieve. So I like this graph because it's consistently going up, and the three is succeeding and going up and up and up and then jumping into the sun. The threes will perform and achieve to no end. They'll have the longest to-do list in the world, and they will get it done. Threes are hyper attuned to what people need from them too, but it's a little bit different than the two in that threes are more attuned to what people see as successful. And people who are important or significant to them, or organizations or cultures or societies who are important or significant to them, have definitions of success. And threes are really good at picking up on what looks like success, and they will do everything they can to look that way. So threes will dress for success. Threes will maintain their image. Threes will look great speaking in front of a group. And threes feel a sense of joy when others are thrilled with what they've done. And or who they've been for them and their values. But sometimes threes might resent when others seem to like them for what they can do, but not for who they are. And sometimes they might not even know who they are beyond what they do. So that's sort of a challenge for threes and the struggle for threes. Fours are labeled the individualist or the romantic. And the reason that they're labeled the individualist is because they tend to feel separate from others and they're kind of on a journey. Fours are motivated to discover what is special and unique about themselves. And so that's why I have this very unique flower here, because they also really appreciate, they have an aesthetic nature, and they very much appreciate beauty and the arts. So they appreciate great music, especially anything that can move them emotionally. So you know how music can really move you emotionally. Fours will be really moved by music, really moved by art, really moved by various things that happen in the world. And they feel a deep sense of joy when they have created something or experienced something unique and beautiful. The challenge fours have is that they may compare themselves to others and feel deficient or lost. And they may be constantly comparing themselves and feeling their separateness from others and continuing to ask the question, what am I best at? What makes me special? What makes me unique? So then they keep digging deeper and trying to find themselves. And then they keep being disappointed in what they find. It's just not good enough. And so then they keep looking again. So that's the journey of the four, which sometimes can feel a little bit tragic to the four. Now the five is different, not so emotional. Motivated to hide in their inner world and observe the outer world from that safe haven. So fives tend to think of the safest place in the world as in their heads with their thoughts. They tend to feel a sense of joy when they're immersed in their own thoughts and ideas, and they may actually fear that too much connection with others will drain or deplete them. So fives live in their inner world. They love their inner world of thoughts. They have great ideas. They tend to seek knowledge, but they don't like to share knowledge very much. They don't like to talk too much with other people about their thoughts, and they tend to feel drained and that other people are maybe coming at them, and that the outer world is kind of a little bit chaotic and crazy, and so they might create a sanctuary for themselves, like their own room or their own apartment or something where they can be alone for a good portion of the time. So for the six, the core motivation is to seek protection. A six wants to create safety. And so a six will look for danger. They'll doubt, they'll double check, they'll ask questions. They feel a sense of joy when they've discovered that everything that could go wrong, they have it covered. And they also, when they've discovered an organization that they trust, with a structure that they believe in. So they might belong to a church or to a family, or they might even look to another person. And once they find that person, they tend to be very loyal, and they like to have that structure in the world that's very protected. So the six is about protection. The thing that's difficult for a six is they tend to be obsessed with what could go wrong, and they fear something bad happening. So sometimes it's hard to manage all of that anxiety. Now, sixes are a little bit hard to discover in the world because they handle that differently. They do kind of fight, flight, or freeze type behavior in response to their anxiety. And some sixes will actually go out and seek danger, but as a way to prove to themselves that they can handle it. So it's still a way of dealing with their fear or anxiety. So they can show up differently from sixes who sort of actively retreat. So sixes are kind of interesting. But you can know that you're six if a lot of what seems to be motivating you is anxiety, and not necessarily anxiety about specific other people, but just anxiety about what could go wrong. Okay, let's take a look at the seven. Now the seven, the way you can tell that you're a seven is you can't stand getting bored, and sevens are pretty easy to see too. They tend to be out there experiencing things, going really fast, doing a lot of things, very enthusiastic, tend to be very positive, and energetic. Sometimes I'll say sevens tend to sparkle. They have this sparkle charisma about them. Sevens feel a sense of joy when they see exciting possibilities in the near future. I love this cartoon of Tigger too, because you're never too old to have fun. That's what I think of when I think of sevens. Live, love, laugh. Sevens love joy, and they love experiencing things, but they do sometimes keep pursuing joy with this frenetic energy. So sometimes they'll feel compulsively driven to go find the next thing. So they might go to a party and 15 minutes into it, they're bored and they want to go to the other party. And they might have 4 parties scheduled in one night. Or they might have 5 things to do that they can't choose between, so they try to do all of them. So it's that need to move on, and they're always looking forward into the future, and it's really hard for them to stay present. They might look at a piece of cake and they want it really badly, and then they have one bite, and then they're not interested in that cake anymore. Now they're interested in something else. They don't even enjoy the bite that they had. So that's the kind of a sense of the 7. So you're a 7 when you're kind of motivated by joy and fun, and you really don't like the negative feelings. So you can be really charismatic, but sitting quietly and being pensive and contemplating your own fear and sadness is just not up your alley at all. Okay, 8. So 8, we talked about them being strong, and 8s are actually motivated to be strong. It's kind of like vulnerable people get run over in the world, so their whole mission in life is to be the strong person so they don't get run over in life, and also to stand up for other people who are weak and make sure that they don't get run over by the bad guys. So it's kind of like a superhero type motivation. But 8s have a lot of very real energy, and they feel a sense of joy when they feel completely alive and energized. That's why I like this picture of this guy, because he's very strong, and he's probably in a weight room, and he's just shouting out with exertion and intensity, but he's probably loving it. He's loving feeling how strong he is. He feels it in his body, and he knows that nobody can hurt him, and that none of his people are going to get hurt while he's around. The thing that 8s sometimes experience is that, they tend to be loud, they tend to state their opinion, and they tend to assert themselves quite frequently, and often they're surprised to find that others see them as bossy or sometimes afraid of them. So that's sort of the thing that the 8 has to work with. I hope I'm saying 8 instead of 9. Okay, so now we will move to the 9s, which is the last of our types. And the 9 is the peacemaker or the mediator. 9s are very quiet. They have very quiet energy. They're motivated to help others get along or be happy, to avoid conflict. They're very quiet, inner people. Like the 5s, they're very hard for you to get a sense of. They feel joy when they're part of something larger than themselves. So, for example, when you're in a large group singing and people are harmonizing with each other, it's just beautiful to a 9, because it's something that one person couldn't achieve on their own. It's an expression of the synergy of the group coming together in harmony. The things that are challenging to a 9 is that sometimes they'll lose themselves in others, and if you ask a 9, what do you want, what's your opinion, they have a hard time saying it. And I think that's the one thing that characterizes 9s, because 9s, for the most part, are kind of an absence of character. So what they do is they're very interested in other people. They're great listeners. They're really good at understanding what other people want, which is why they're great mediators, but they're not very good at understanding what they want. And sometimes they will completely lose themselves and not have a sense of self. And so their journey is to find themselves. So that is an overview of sort of the core sense of each type. Keep in mind that assessments will give you a first sort, and then the descriptions of the various types that you scored high on, and to see where you resonate is a good second step to take. And then what you want to do is look at your core motivation. So you may be, you may have behavior, or you may resonate with things from many types, because we all have all the types in us. But there's one thing at the bottom of why you do the things that you do in life that you feel sort of compelled to do, or the things that you expend a lot of unnecessary energy on. If you make a log of those and you ask yourself, well, why did I do that? And you write the reason why you felt you had to do that, the things you feel like you have to do and you can't not do, or the things you absolutely can't do because there's nothing that's going to get you to do it, and it logically doesn't make sense. Those are the things you want to note. And then what is your thinking process behind that? And sometimes you can see a pattern. And if you see a pattern in your thinking process and you're just aware of your thoughts, you can then see which of these core motivations they resonate with the most. Another thing you can always do is ask others for their opinions, but again, you're the final judge. So for any of you that have done your Enneagram test and are still searching and aren't sure, feel free to talk to me about it and talk to me a little bit about kind of what you're trying to choose between, and I'm happy to share my opinion with you for what it's worth. Enjoy. This is a really fun assessment, and this is only one of many classes and overviews that we will have with it.